Now, when I meet a situation, anything that's going on in my life, and not that any of us ever have that stuff that comes down the pike, but when I meet a lesson, first thing I do is, okay, what's my child doing? Okay, because if my child is acting like, you know, oh, okay, I need to know that and say, okay, put it on hold. We'll get to you in a minute because you got an important role to play, but right now, I just need to check in with you. Then you check in with your victim. Are you playing the victim or are you playing the victimizer? Because a lot of times we'd like to say, oh, we're the victim. A lot of times we're also the victimizer. We're the ones that, well, I'll get my needs met at all costs. Up yours. Okay? We act that way. Ask which one, and then say, okay, can you hold? Because I'd really like to take you up here on this, but you're not there yet. I check in. Okay, what do I feel like I'm going to have to give up on? What's really pushing my buttons? Or what am I saying? Okay, I'm not dealing with you. Where are we going? And with the saboteur, where am I the one taking out the gun and shooting myself in the foot? Or why am I co-creating the drama with this person? Okay? Because here's the lesson of the saboteur. And this, strangely enough, in our entitled reality, is actually trying to teach us we do deserve the best. And that's something that we're conditioned not to believe. How many times have you been told you don't deserve Jack? Or you'll get just exactly like you deserve. Or parents go, I hope you get a kid just like you. Okay, so we believe we don't deserve good things, we only deserve the bad things. I'm sorry, ain't true. You deserve the best the world has to offer. When you put your best in, you've earned the best out. Now, I'm not one of those entitlement folks either. Okay, that's not what I'm saying. And by the way, the entitled are the probably 1% more than anybody at the other 98, because they believe they're entitled to do what they do. Think about that. Okay, now when you've run it past all of these and you put them on hold, guess what you get? You get to make the circle and come all the way about here, and this is what you get. This is the most powerful character of all, the authentic child. Because the authentic child looks at the world as a new adventure every day. They're enthusiastic, they're excited, they're waiting, they're anticipating. If they fall, they get right back up and keep going because they know that falling down is how you learn to walk, run, and do everything else. And they're excited, and they're open, and they're honest. Oh, God, are they honest? Okay? That's where you want to be. And you only get there by owning the whole pack. And at the point you do that, that's getting conscious. So when we were talking about getting more over in the conscious zone, that's how you do it. Because you check your own stuff. It's not for someone else to check you. Now here's the rest of the thing on the teeter-totter, because I love this. You are exactly 50% of any dynamic you co-create. Exactly 50. Not 49, 51, Not 90, 10, You are half that dynamic. And the sooner you get off the it's all their fault, or it's all my fault. Both one are equally egotistical, okay? But your job is to do 100% of your 50%. So when you get that lesson, your job is to do 100% of your 50%, which is to move to center and then up. Their 50% is not your job, not your problem, not your right, not your responsibility. Stay the blip off their end of the teeter-totter. Because when you start messing with someone else's end, what you're saying is, I know what's right for you, and I know better than you what you're right and what you deserve and what your value is. And that's not so. That's between you and whoever is upstairs on your shift. So when you let go of this, okay, of it being about them, now here's the two kinds of mirrors. Because, you know, Creator is really smart. He gave some marvelous mirrors, okay? And I'm going to kind of go over these because it'll help you understand. Yes?
This is actually going back, so I wanted to ask before you started something else. You're mentioning that people don't think that they deserve the best and all that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. And from my perspective, I grew up in from 64 to 70. In 70, I started seeing marketing telling everybody that they were worth it. You did deserve it. Mm-hmm. And now it seems to me we have an entire generation of people who believe that they deserve everything.
Right.
So I'm just wondering where that fits
in. Because what they didn't put in is the part that's here. Whatever this is, you got to get to the balance. That's when you, because you're the only person that knows, okay? And you only own it when you're no longer expecting it out of somebody else. It's not my job to give it to you. It's your job to work yours until you own yours for you. It's not my job to give it to you just because you wear, you know, fairy sprinkles and all of that kind of stuff. That's not my job. It's not your job to do it. That's why I said you don't do their 50%. But when you put your 100% of your 50% in, then you deserve what you have created. In other words, you deserve the fruits of your labors. And not me saying, oh, you don't deserve that. Just because you did everything you were supposed to, you still don't get it. And we are the measurement. We and whoever is upstairs are the ones that can judge that. Anybody else? Sorry, not in their job description. Okay, so the first mirror. I call this the mirror of childhood. It's like the funhouse mirror, okay? Because we as adults have our own set of distortions. If I were to, let's say you've got 20/20 vision, and if I were to walk over and tell you that the only right way to see the world is through this set of glasses, I would be handing you a set of distortions and telling you until you could see clearly through them, you were wrong, you were bad. Now think about that. But that's what we as adults tend to do to kids, okay? Is we tell them this is the only right way you're supposed to see things. Distorted like we do, okay? So what we as children do is we distort ourselves to create that equal and opposite distortion. So we become the product, we adapt to meet this set of distorted expectations. I was expected, part of my neurological disorder is I still have to think, you can tell my writing kind of sucks. I still have to think the shape of a letter to write it, and then I still have to think to remember how to spell it. So what I'm actually, that's why I don't write a lot. I may draw more, but that's why I don't write a lot. So if I'm being told that the measurement of me is my writing and that's the only way I can be judged, I'm a failure. Now I could draw you anything, okay? And if you ask me, I could tell you, but if the only way to measure is by writing, you're not going to get an outcome. Think about that. So we distort to meet the expectations. Okay, next mirror, and this is as we move on up in the world. There's two kinds. Okay, we look in the mirror, and this is the one that's in the convenience store. And that person has got a bigger than life, same thing you do. They just, you know, it's like, oh my God, I can see it so plainly, but I don't see that I do it too. But the one that really gets us, but this is the one that happens most often, is the concave mirror. And they're our exact opposite. And so that's when the victim meets the victimizer. Okay? So all of these mirrors, so that person that you're pointing your finger at is always your best teacher because they show you what's in your blind spot. That's their role. So you use them as a mirror. Instead of going, oh, curse you, Red Baron, okay, you go, oh, thank God you're there. Because otherwise I wouldn't see what's in my blind spot. Ew. Okay, and many of us disown chunks of ourselves as we adapt. Okay, so it's in the reclaiming process. I have to reclaim. If I'm a victim, I have to reclaim my ownership for my responsibility for my outcomes. It's not your job to make it better for me or to be nice to me because I had a bad time, okay? Got it. Okay. This is the mirror you look for today. Not very good at drawing at this angle, but you get the picture. That one's a straight glass picture of you. It's an accurate. And the healthier you get, the more coherent you get, the more accurate a mirror you provide for other people, and they for you. Now here's the beauty. The healthier you get and the more congruent you get with you and the more accepting you get of you, the more you're able to do it with, to, and for others. But you draw to you people at an equal level of healing. So instead of getting the ones where you're way the heck out on the teeter-totter, you get ones that you're pretty close, but yeah, I need to do more of this. And, you know, I can model for that person how to do this if they choose, but if they don't, hey, they fall off the teeter-totter. And your job is not to prevent other people from falling off the teeter-totter. And that's where so many of us get stuck, is we're still trying to fix it for everybody else. So does that kind of make some sense now? Okay, because now you can begin to grasp the tools. And one of the ways I used for filling a lot of my holes was I used something called affirmations. You've all heard about them, all the Saturday Night Live skits and everything else. They're actually very powerful. They're very effective. And because you are the only person who can say them and they have any meaning. And I've used them through the years, and I can tell when I'm not using them because things tend to just slide gradually back. And so it's kind of like, oops, you know. So we need to make sure that we're doing things on a consistent basis to maintain. So these are your 4 teaching archetypes. Now, I told Brian I'll come back at some point and you have actually 8. So let me tell you who the 8 are, or the 12. It's actually a total of 12. But the other 8 are the rest of your committee members in your head. Now I want you to think about this. How many times have you asked yourself a question and answered it? How many times have you heard yourself saying something and then you'll respond and you have this, okay, these are you and your committee members having a discussion, but your committee members are also your archetypes. They're also the parts that fill you out and round you out to where that you become the whole person you want to be. And the more you know about your archetypes, like one of mine, guess what? One of my primary ones is the storyteller. Okay, I don't really regard myself as much a teacher as I do a storyteller. I'm also an alchemist. And an alchemist is the one that likes to take a base metal and convert it to something of great value. And so when I give tools, that's what I consider the alchemy, is teaching someone how to become what it is they say they want out of life. And that to me is the greatest fun in the world. It's like, oh, I get to play. That's why I love coming in here, is because, hey, I get to play again. So it's, as your different archetypes, but I also have a very, very strong military archetype, okay? And that's because of the structure, the roles, the family system, all of those that are inherent in the original form. And I'm going to call it the original form of the military. It was the cadre that protected. It was the group that agreed to put their life on the line to do whatever it needed to make the changes that needed to be made. So we have these different archetypes that represent different facets of our personality. And that's one of the things that is really fun when you start learning who yours are. Some of them are kind of surprising and oh, well, I'd never thought of myself that way, but yeah, you are. So now this is all part of what has to be motivated. This organism gets to be motivated. And, oh dear, I need my, the value scale sheets. Okay, and I want the page that, well, it'll look like this when you've got it.
Oh, it's the first page.
Okay, now let me do a quick check. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11. I'll ask you to just flag your hands up. Okay, how many of you have D, and that's the top one, as either your highest score or your second highest score? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay. All right, 8 of you. Okay, and there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay. So 8 11ths. Oh wait, this is, I'm getting myself confused, so let me scratch and do this over. Okay, first of all, let me tell you, it's only 5% of the general population that has it as highest or tied for highest. Now look how many of you are in this room. Okay? So 8/11ths of you, okay, have this as a highest or tied for highest. Yet it's only 5% of the population. That's one of the reasons you belong here. Okay, is having that is a part of it. Okay, and there's several of these that'll give you reasons why you're here. Okay, the D, okay, which is one of my favorite, okay, because it's been so disowned. Okay, most people don't recognize it. This is the person that sees the big picture. They are global thinkers, so they have to see how this applies to this, impacts this, causes this, makes this happen. And before they will even start, in many instances, they are looking at all of those things. So there's that period where they just sort of look up, look over, look to the side, look down and go, and then they just sort of go blank. Okay, they're literally then, they've taken all the input they can, and they're trying to figure out, okay, what does this really mean? Where does it fit? They care very much about the rights of the individual. Okay, you will not manage a D if the D does not respect you, because a D must respect you to actually listen to you and follow you. Because if they don't, it's kind of like they're already busy doing an end run. They are very much into fairness, equality. They're really amazing thinkers, but they can get caught in a cycle of overthinking. So D's, give yourself a time limit to think on it. Say, all right, I'm giving myself a half an hour, whatever, I'm going to give myself a half an hour to run through it. Then I have to present an outcome. Okay? Now, D's are absolutely famous for what I call tethering. How many of you as a kid ever read a book called A Wrinkle in Time? Okay, the way that time travel took place is you went across the top of the time waves, okay? That's how D thinks. So a D is truly the product of every piece of their history. So when they come up with an observation, an opinion, a thought, anything like that, it's the gleaning from all of this that they've done. They just forget that you weren't along on the trip. So they don't have your history to know why you know that or how you know it. And a lot of times they'll ask you, and you'll go, I don't know, it just is. Because it is so hardwired in you to already have done all this processing, okay, that you don't even know you've done it. Big tip, backwards chain. When somebody gives you that deer in the headlights look, and how many of you are used to it? Because you'll go through something and you'll just get the, okay. What you do is you stop and say, okay, how'd I get there from here? And backwards chain through your process of how you arrived at that conclusion, and then take them on the steps in between. It will make such a huge difference in your communication. Also, you'll be able to make it so much clearer, okay? And it's a lot more fun for both of you. And you will so often, though, see that, now, here's another tendency you have. You just get louder and more intense when you're trying to explain, because obviously you didn't hear me. No, I didn't follow you on the trip. Okay, I wasn't there. So you back up and you go, okay, here's my steps of how I got there. And this is why I believe this. It's also good for you, because then you learn a lot more about yourself. You know, things that you never even recognized were of value, And that can be from something you read, something you saw, a movie. It can come from anywhere, but it's all filed away back there. So the good news is you have this incredible gift. The bad news is 95% of the population looks at you and goes, what the are you talking about? Okay? Just understand that's where you need to slow down and consider that they weren't along on the journey. Making some sense for those of you who do that? How many times have you been caught? Uh-huh. And then you do, well, any idiot ought to be able to see that. It's as plain as the nose on your face, and they want to choke you to death. Right? Do you say that a lot? It's so obvious to you. Because you're hardwired that way. Okay, next. How many of you have A as your highest or second highest? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay. That's only 10% of the population. Okay, so for you, if you're DNA, okay, 85% of the population is looking at you like, what rock? You crawled where? Okay. No. The good news first about the A's. They're the only people that really and truly like and love people. The rest cohabitate with, coexist alongside of, tolerate, put up with. Okay. A's love people. They love them. They also care very much about the group, the whole social change, social progress, social process. They're the ones that really want to make things work that way for everyone. And they actually do care. Bad news? Oh my God, you're the codependent, fixers, enablers, make it better for everybody else and forget yourself. That is your downfall. And when you do that, you think you're really being nice. What the person on the receiving end hears is, you're so dumb that if you don't have me around to help you, you'll never make it out of this. That's what they hear. That's not your intention, but that's what they hear. And so they look at you like, yeah, you and your, okay. They're not very fond of you. So A's really do like people, really do want to help. Now, the paradox is if you know you're an A, but again, your goal is to go to the middle, not the extremes. Get to the middle, and it's a magnificent trait because you really do care. Bad news is if you're trying to fix everybody else, because let me tell you something, nobody else can be fixed. Big, big, big truth that A's hate. But if I just know, tools, you can give them tools. You can show them how to use the tools. But you cannot expect them to pick them up and use them. It said, oh, you can take a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. Okay, you can give it the tools. Now here's the thing, they may pick that set of tools up 10 years later. So they at least got it. They're just not there yet. And that's not your job. That's not your 50%, that's theirs. Okay, you did your 50. Give it, leave it. Periodically, you can check back in. By the way, have you thought about that? But that's as far as you can go. You can't blame, shame, guilt trip, or anything else. Well, you know, if you just try that, it'd work. It's like that sound, this is, right, not, okay? Beginning to make some sense? Okay. How many of you have F as highest or second highest? You do, don't you? Okay. Okay, one. Holy. Okay.
Count yourself lucky.
All right. This is 15% of the population. Okay, so this is 1/11. You know, we're getting a little closer here, percentage-wise at
You have
least.
a lot of people now
Okay, and it's really funny because I've seen you do it a couple of times.
already.
Uh-huh. I have a little song that goes with this one. If you want to get it done, get an F. If you want to get it done, get an F. Because Fs are the ones that want to achieve, accomplish, make it happen, do it. Do it best, do it fastest, do it most thoroughly, do it. And they cannot stand to sit around and wait when everybody else is sitting on their thumb. An F will go just nuts. Also, if a bunch of Ds and As are discussing things and designing the better world that we all should be living in, the F is, okay, tell me what you want done, tell me when you want it done by, tell me how many of you want, and then leave me alone, let me get it done because you guys are driving me nuts with all of your yakking and yammering.
Spot on.
Uh-huh.
That's
And the mother, the expectant mother, she's the other F.
Oh.
Okay, and I watched because you were offering to tape it down after someone tripped on it. I think you were the one. And she said, no, I'll get it. Because she has to make sure it is done and done right, or else.
We'll have to make sure
Okay,
it's a room.
so that's that piece. So that F has achievement. And they're very competitive, win at all costs. They have been known to manipulate. That's kind of their downside, is they will manipulate, connive, or do whatever it. However, they will achieve, because that is their driving force, is to achieve. Now, many people disown this one because they think it's being pushy. That's usually because they don't want to be pushed. See, that's that motivation. Okay, you just leave me alone. I'll get it in my own good time. Don't. So when a DA tells an F says, I'll get around to it when I'm ready, and until then, cancel, cancel, cancel. Okay. And you can be great friends, but you always also know this about the person, and you go, yeah, when it happens. Beginning to sort of fit together. Okay, how many of you have C as highest, second highest, or tied for any of the above? Ask me if I'm surprised.
Are you surprised?
Not one bit. 40% of the population has this as highest, tied for highest, or second highest. Right, wrong, black, white, good, bad, my way or the highway, and of course my way is best. And if you ain't willing, get out of here. Okay, they tend to be very absolutistic, and I'm giving you the downside first. The upside is you better have one on your team. Okay, they have the most incredible purpose because they're the ones that know the rules, the regulations, the laws, the expectations, the guidelines, all of the stuff that if you don't follow, you're screwed. And they like to make sure that you follow them. Now, you can do one of two things. You can treat them like the enemy, and oh my God, they will drive you nuts. Or you can treat them like, thank God you're here. Will you be responsible for maintaining our logs, our guidelines, all of these things? Make sure we stay in compliance, because if we're not, and I worked with too many social programs that they would write a grant with a great idea, and then to find out what they'd written for didn't work. So they would evolve that DNA combination. They would evolve and do all of these things. They forgot to run it past the C. They didn't send in the addendum, and because they didn't send in the addendum, even though they exceeded monumentally the expectations, because they didn't follow the letter of the contract, they had to pay money back. Oh, you learn the value of a C real fast that way. Okay, so each one has a vital role. we have a higher number of Cs than most other countries. But as we get more of the push and shove going on, see, we've moved in this country to more extremisms than we've been, and I've been around for 3/4 of a century, so I've seen a lot of eras. And we're at a more extreme era now than we've been in my time in the country. The only time that ever came close to it was the McCarthyism era. But other than that, we haven't really been close to it before, but we've been moving further and further apart. And see, we could only pull it together on 9/11. We could only pull it together for about 4 months. And then we were back at everybody's throats. And it's just, you know, so that's part of that thing, is more people are adapting and adopting that. But that's happening in some other countries now. We're seeing a higher rise in other countries where they're experiencing the extremism. Okay? So that's just kind of a side note as to how this can play in. But C's like their rules, like their regs, like their guidelines. And a lot of people use that as their stability, or they have a partner who has that and they agree to listen to the partner. So that's why when you're, you know, if you're looking on starting up a company at some point in time, you better make sure all of these are covered. Okay? And that you respect what each brings to the table. Okay. Next one. How many of you have B as highest or second highest? One. Okay. Okay. So good. You represent that. Now, guys, I'm going to tell you, you're going to need to listen to her, because she's going to bring a different perspective in the class. And even though she's new, you know, still, get that piece in. This one has some distinct different categories, okay? And they fall very decidedly in these categories. One are the true adolescents, 14 through 26. Are you in that age range? Okay. So that represents a big part of it. And that's where you know what you don't want. You haven't figured out fully what you do want, but you don't like being told that you have to do it this way, especially if you have already been developing a skill, talent, or ability that you know works for you. And so you will doggedly say, no, I'm not going to do it that way. This works. So that's one piece. The next really fascinating group are the ones I call the crew chiefs. And they are phenomenally good at whatever it is they do. And they really don't care what your opinion is, because they know that what they're doing works. And I had one guy that I was doing testing on this one time. And out of the points possible, all of his but 8 were B. Okay? Now think about that. All of his points were in B. Let me tell you about Bill. He lived up in northern Idaho, okay? And he was the true jack of all trades, comma, master of all. Okay? When you had a problem that there was no solution to, you came to Bill. The community knew that. You came to Bill. There was a train that fell off a trestle. Engines are heavy. And all of the engineers and all of the paper train puppies could not figure out, with the way that, you know, the landform, the river, the everything else, how to get it out. Finally, they said, go ask Bill. He told him what he needed. He got it out. Okay. Bill was a hunter, a fisher, he worked heavy equipment. He did everything. okay, and he knew everything you could think of about everything, but you literally had to pull it out of him. He was not the one going out there and say, look at me. It was like, no, 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 okay? He decided that he didn't want, they were going to log the area behind where he lived, and he didn't want it ruined. And when they would come in, usually with logging roads, you'd have floods, you'd have mudslides, you'd have all of the damage right after. Bill did not want that area ruined because they were cutting a road through it. And he looked at the plans of where the road was cut, and he was just heartsick. So he had never, done it per se as designing, building the road, but he decided that he was going to cut the road no matter what. So his bid, and because it's a small county and pretty close-knit, his bid was $5,000 under the guy that has the lowest bid, and you don't have to pay me until 4 years of successfully the road staying in and there not being any washouts. You'll pay me then. And then if you choose to pay me that other $5,000, I'll take it. Well, they were in kind of tight straits, so they took him up on it. If it had been cut the way that the engineers, surveyors, and everybody else had said, it would have washed out in 8 different places, because he told them where it would. And so there were some washouts, but not from the road, but from the upper things. And if they'd cut it, though, where they wanted to cut it, the road would have been gone. There was not a bit of trouble. So that's a B at their best. So they know things. And so they will often be a crew chief. They'll tell other people how to do it. And they will watch out for those that are under them. I mean, they are really dogged about, my team is my team, and I don't want to work with anybody but my team. Okay, so that's 5% of the population. The third are the artists and artisans who are willing to break with tradition and do new forms of music, art, anything like that. Frank Lloyd Wright was my favorite example of that, because he was doing 100 years ago what's contemporary still today. And his ideas on design, he was that form follows function, it ought to fit what it's supposed to do. And he was also an engineering genius. He's the one that all skyscrapers that we have today with the floating pylons that make them earthquake-proof, that's his design. Smart old fella, but egotistical as hell, okay? All right, how many of you have E as highest or second highest? Okay. %. You've heard the old saying, too many chiefs and not enough Indians? Okay. E's are the Indians. They are the ones who will actually say, you tell me what to do, you make sure that I'm covered. I want to do the good job, I want to do the best, I want to work in a team that I respect, I appreciate, I admire, and you keep me covered. You give me what I need, and I will work my tail off to make you a success. So they really are the ones that are willing to do the hard work that is your underpinning. Now, they are also the ones, and here's their flip side. If you've got too much of a D or a E score, you'll go with Jimmy Jones to Guyana and do the Kool-Aid cocktail. They tend also to follow the very strong leaders, but pretty blindly. And they will believe whatever they hear, see, because the person knows how to play to their suit. So if I know that this is something that's really important to you, I'll make sure I include this. And if I know that your dad didn't love you when you're little, I'm going to be the father figure, kind of stuff. That was what that's how he operated. And so they know how to play to, the leaders will know how to play to the followers. And so that's where you see people sort of blindly following in these situations. Okay, so does this make some sense? Yes.
Is it possible for the E to also be a leader?
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah. Because many people, because of the spread of their points, okay, that may be like it might be your stronger point. However, you have also the leadership, so you're the one that literally sees it from both ends of the spectrum. And a lot of really good military leaders actually have this because they very much see their troops as theirs. They are part of my team, okay? And I am part of their team. So it's a mutuality, but it's all about that team. Now, here's a funny one. A long time ago, there were two teams that one was a very, very, very strong E score, and the other one was a strong B score, and they were both contender football teams. And that was back way before any of you probably were even born. One was the Dallas Cowboys under Tom Landry. That was an E team. The few times that the players did not follow the play explicitly as he gave it, they were sidelined because they were supposed to be that absolute follower. The B was the Raiders back, way back when, and it was kind of like, win at all cost, anybody, but if you happen to have the ball, I'll back you, but if but it was this, a lot of that egos and individual, and you never knew what to expect out of them, but they could be the most rowdy, uncouth bunch of folks you've ever seen. So it was just a very different, and all the rest of the football, because where this was normed, I'll give you just a little history on it. It was normed back when the Bell Network was still alive, so it was normed across all the Bell system, because one of the people that developed this test was a Bell executive. It was normed across the football leagues because at that point in time, one of the general managers was in this class, okay? It was normed against what was then Skaggs and Albertsons as a co-chain, and so it was normed with both the employees and customers. It was normed with a prison. It was normed with a social service agency and a multinational company. And so each of the students who developed this, those were their backgrounds, and they never published it, which to me, it's been one of the most valuable tools I've ever used, because it gives the motivation. Because here's the thing, when he gave them a chance to do their final project as a group, if they chose, or they could do individual studies. This particular group, because they were such a team, chose to do it as a group that worked so well going through. And so the task, he said, was, all right, your job is to figure out how you're going to motivate everyone, because different people are motivated by different things. And so they went through, and so they had to do a lot of figuring it out, and they finally came up that values are the things that motivate you. If it's not your value, it doesn't motivate you. If money's not your thing, people can throw money at you and you really don't care. If your creative ability being respected and valued is what it is, then that's what motivates you. So once you know what not only motivates you, because you need to know it for you, which this gives you some pretty good insight, but also motivates your fellow team members. When you're sitting down to do a project, you even know who to assign which tasks to. If you really need to do it the best, most efficient, effective way, is you need to make sure your task assignments reflect everyone's values. Otherwise, you're going to be butting heads way too much. And then you need to know what the strengths of each value scale are so that you know, okay, if I put this person in this situation, they're not going to succeed, nor are they going to learn as well. And it's not that you don't play all the different roles. You need to learn to play them. However, wherever possible, play to your strong suit. Makes a lot more sense and makes life a whole lot easier. Now, questions on any, all of the above? Yes?
Which of these are you?
Okay, on my value scale, I'm in order F, D, A, C, E, no, C, B, E. And the three highest are pretty consistently equal. You know, just a point or so. And these are pretty consistently lower, but they're supporting characters. Now, here's the thing it's important to understand. These will change by life experience. And I take this every year, so when you get your, get a copy of this, a blank one, take it every year. It gives you a real valuable chunk of feedback in terms of what you've grown, where you've changed throughout the year. And I've got these going back for years. And I can really see because, for instance, my A score used to be a whole lot higher. Used to be my top score. Okay, I started recognizing that if the same people keep coming back for the same reason, and it was more because I did the fixing rather than giving them the tools, and it wasn't successful, that was a learning for me. So I was then able to share that. And so that's where it'll, you'll see the changes based on what works for you. Okay.
As somebody who's starting up a company, because you said something about that earlier, I was wondering, would you definitely recommend having everyone that's helping start the company take this? And also,
Yes.
also with that, let's say that we do have a majority of one letter. What would you recommend with that?
Okay, then if you have a lot of your people are the same, then take specific areas of. It's like, and I'll give you an example. My D score, I see a certain range really much better. Whereas Brian, who also has a high D score, sees this range a whole lot better. So we, even with that, break down. But I also make sure that every one of these is covered with at least an 8 in any group I work with, because they are my protectors of my blind spot. They're the ones that tell me, by the way, the emperor is absolutely stark raving naked. Now, do you want to go out that way, or you need those people that provide that insight. So make sure your team member has it, and if not, find a way to get it for your team, because I've seen too many go down the tube without it.
So, looking at the statistics on the board, our class seems to be in the minority. Why do you think that is?
Because to be in this field, that is one of the things that's very helpful. Okay, is to see the big picture, really to care about your outcome and your product and how it's going to influence people. Think about that. You're not so likely to violate your ethics okay, and just be sold to the highest bidder for the buck, okay? So that's going to be a big difference. You know, you look at that, okay? How many of you really like to pull from a multitude of backgrounds? Okay, my point. And see, that's a big part of what a D and an A both tend to do. Now, there's a thing that I sketched out years ago, and it's kind of in the way people think. There's some people that think in a very linear pattern, okay? And so they may be an absolute genius in this and pretty good in this, but they have no ability to generalize it or transfer it into another area. They're the ones I really call the paper train puppies. God, they can rote regurgitate every statistic known to mankind, and they can tell you how, when, where, why, how many of them, but they don't know what to do with it. They have no practical application. Okay, there's an awful lot of people out there. Okay, next group. And it comes in two interesting different ways. Okay, there's the jack of all trades and master of none. And there is a master across the board of a multitude of things as it applies to one thing. Best one I ever saw was a music professor. He could play any instrument, he could compose, he could teach. He knew music business, he knew music history, he knew music everything. You got him out of the context of music. Hi, my name is. Could not, but anything. He was so consumed with the passion of music and extremely well-rounded and just an absolute genius. You know, you could hum a note and ask him to compose something off of it, and he could do it just for fun. And if you said, nobody's ever been able to teach me, oh, he loved that challenge, okay? Then there's the group kind of like a football shape, okay? They know quite a bit about a lot of things, and they're fairly well-rounded, some less so, some more so, okay? But they are fairly well-rounded, just haven't had the exposure and experience. Okay. I mean, that's the global, all right? And they literally bounce back and forth from one reference point to another because they're seeing it from all the different perspectives they've ever experienced in their life. And so when they're talking about something, they're talking about it technically, artistically, aesthetically, intuitively, the whole 9 yards. And D's sometimes will fall in that category, and that's why you'll see them just kind of pinging in their heads at times, because they're checking it out in all these different places before they come out with a statement, because they don't like being seen as dumb. Yes?
What's the comparison between this and tests like Myers-Briggs and other psychological tests?
Okay, cool. There's a lot of overlap. My former compadre that I used to team teach with, and he is more technical, and he used to call me, you know, his hippy-trippy partner, and I'd call him my hardwired geek, you know. And he was one of the geniuses with doing the Myers-Briggs. And so what he would do is he would pull it out, and we would actually, in fact, if you look at this sheet, if you got this sheet, what I have people do is take the results of their Myers-Briggs, the results of their archetypes, the results of their value scale. I use Gregork's mind, which is an absolute, I think Brian may be doing that. You do the Johari window, because what it does is, I think we, as whatever we do, we need to have a 360 view of ourselves. Because then you can be a lot more accepting of someone else's 360. Okay? And if we get out of our blind spot, we're not nearly as vulnerable, because one of the strengths of, it's like a lot of times when I'm teaching in a more community healing setting, which was one of the fields I did a lot of, I will self-reveal about some of the things that have happened to me and what I've been through. Okay? Because I can talk about it and discuss it as if it happened to another person, because that's not who I am. That was the honing to what I am. So I don't own, I call it the husk. I don't own the husk. That was what happened. I own the kernel. That's what I got out of it. Okay? So with the Myers-Briggs, it actually parallels. I mean, we'll pull out. Quite often, for instance, the D will parallel, and I'm trying to remember which one it is. Tim, you know, Tim will, it was so funny because we would just go, oh yeah, and they, you know, and then he would be talking about it, and I would say, okay, the comparison here is, because, and see, we were lucky because we knew that in each of our areas we were the best at what we did. We could be totally supportive of what the other one did. And he would, you know, and he would jump in there and he would say, okay, now my version on the big picture is this one, but it does parallel. And this was the sheet we used to use with our students when we would team teach, so they were getting the 360 of themselves. Because where we did the largest part of our teaching were people exiting the military. Anywhere from, they'd been anywhere from 4 years to, we had a few 30-year, okay, that were in our classes. And we were a pre-technical prep program, so that the military often has a big blind spot. They work so long as a team that they don't know what they individually bring to the table. So our role was to help them see what is the individual they bring to the table, and then how that fit in with a civilian team that doesn't have the same rules as a military team. And so when you begin to look at, there's a lot of parallel, but there's some beautiful differences, and that's the value, is that each brings in the differences. So I hope that answered, because I'm not the MBTI expert. Now, one thing I'm hoping that Brian's going to do for you guys, it's really valuable. If not, do it among yourselves anyway. Do the Johari window, Johari. Do the Johari window. Do what you see, and then ask your compatriots to do what they see. So you know what's in your blind spot, and what's in your known, and what's in the unknown. And it's an incredibly valuable tool, because many times you don't see those things in yourself, but others see them. I mean, it's real obvious. So hopefully that answered. And that's why I am really, anytime, use this process. Anytime you take another test or anything, go through and look at, okay, what are the things that I pick out of this? And another great one, let me think, there's a site called Similar Minds. And it's got a whole lot of tests. It gives a version of the MBTI, for instance. It gives the global assessment. It gives, there's even one on famous movies. Which famous movie are you? Which famous character are you in history? Gives a lot of different. And we would use tests like that that have the same kind of thing in it, so that people could then compare. And it's amazing how sometimes a simplistic, if you keep seeing the same elements, like for instance, a lot of times, and I'll pick on the F score here, a lot of times with an F score, you can be pretty blunt and pretty downright, almost what you'd call abrasive. Okay, and if you have that combined with a really high C score, which by the way, many attorneys have that one, F and C. They know the rules, the laws, the regs, everything else, and they know how to bend them, break them, and do everything else because they know the rules and laws. Okay, so, yeah, but when you look at how those different ones play out in your life, you've got a lot more control. But if you have a really high F score, you can be a little bit abrasive and abrupt, and if you have a high C score that you're the only one right, and on this one test, you come up with, oh, I think it's got Hitler and it's got Saddam Hussein as some of the characters, or Abraham Lincoln, or John F. Kennedy, you know, and it's just little simple, silly captures. However, if you really get in and look at some of those characteristics of those people, you know, it also gives, because they've all got flip sides. And what we'd have the students do is, okay, what's the positive traits of Saddam? What's the negative traits? Same way with John F. Kennedy, you know, positive and negative. But you want to look at what the traits come out. One of the other things, if you ever have a chance to take something called the Dependable Strengths Articulation Process, take it. Generally, somebody will have a class in it, and it's usually 2.5 days. And what it does is it gives you, when your outcome is a list of your absolute top strengths. And if you know what your strengths are, then you're going to have a lot more ability to market what you do than if you don't know what they are. It's like one of my strengths is to pull pieces together from some of the most divergent areas to where that they link together and they're in agreement. It's like, okay, give you an example. Part of my career, I was a children's librarian as well as an adult librarian. Okay, I've been a counselor, window trimmer, ran a media production center, started it from scratch and got it up and running in 20 months, which was a little fast. I have done a lot of others, buck Christmas trees, you know, so I go across. I've worked on cars. I used to drive race cars. Grew up around engineers, so I understand that field. So you pick up things. I mean, most of us are very much like silly putty. We pick things up, okay? And we don't always know that we've picked it up, but we've got it. We're imprinted with it, and we can call it to use. And that's your goal, is to call these things to use. And hopefully when I come back in next time and we go through what your 8 archetypes are, that's going to bring a lot more color to it. Because as you start filling in what your wheel is like, you've got a 360 picture of yourself. Now, take this when you're starting to develop, because Brian is the best at teaching character development and any of that, anybody I've seen. Okay, he loves it and he's good at it. So when you're developing your character, these are the kinds of things you're going to need to look at. Okay, what motivates them? What scares them? What do they appreciate? What do they think is a waste of time? How do they look at politics? How do they look at other people, period? You know. So who else has a question? I will answer. How many of you have a hard time coming up with questions, by the way? Okay. In your field, I'm going to suggest you develop a set of questions that you operate from. Okay? It really helps. How many of you are would call yourself shy? Any of you in here call yourself kind of shy, a little on the fence? Okay. It's wonderful, because if you ask questions, most people, if you really listen to the reports, don't feel they're heard. So if you ask questions, you've just given a person an option to be heard, for their opinion to matter, for what they have to say to be of value.
I guess I have kind of found a question now. Earlier off camera, we were talking about sci-fi books, but what I want to know, this is kind of my question to gain an insight on people, is what piece of media, like book or movie or soundtrack or anything like that, aligns mostly with your viewpoint? So like something that you like or something that you can relate to.
Okay, I'll give you some of my favorite authors. That's one thing. Absolutely love, as I said, anything by Caroline Myss. She's, yeah. Joe Dispenza, a guy that really is in a lot of the hardwiring, how the brain goes together. Science fiction authors, one of my favorites, and as a child librarian, I had to read all the books that came into the library. So, because I was also trained as a counselor, I was what you call a bibliotherapist. So I knew which book to give to what kid when they needed, when they were dealing with something. So I loved like Andre Norton. I like a lot of the way that some, Star Trek and some of the others think, because they're forward thinking, but they also are looking at possibilities we haven't considered. Now, I always like to consider the impossible, because one of the pieces out of NLP that was the most valuable piece I ever got was every piece of a person's behavior is logical. Your job is to figure out what made it logical. Oh, that was just, heart, I like the guy Harville Hendrix. You see the imago on here. He's the guy that came up with the process of, we tend to get into relationships with an imago, which is an Italian word for image, who is the image of our childhood primary caretakers, like parents, whoever you were raised by. The person you get in a relationship generally is the imago, and you try and change them to get your needs met, and they try and change you to get their needs met. I loved, that whole concept is like, oh God, that explains so much, okay? In terms of the developmental way that we become who we are, there's nobody better than Jean Elsley Clark. And she's got one book that I used when I taught in prisons called Growing Up Again. And I used this with the inmates because many of them had missed so much of the foundational steps they needed. That's part of why they were there in childhood. So this is really good at explaining those foundational developmental steps, in kind of a cookbook manner. So I like to draw, oh Lord, the authors, and the videos. There's so many things out there. But I want to know, my question is always why. I like the histories of people. One of the most fascinating stories I remember was a whole series actually by an author named Kate Soretti. And all of you are too young to know, but she was an illustrator from Hungary. And when she came over here right after the war, that was all she was known for. But when she was trying to sell some of her drawings, the publisher said, but if you put your stories down, people would love them and your drawings would support them. And so she did, and became an award-winning author, illustrator. So I loved her process, though, and her way of looking at things. I loved a book called, I think it was Carry On, Mr. Bowditch, and it was about the guy that literally developed the tables and all that are used when we made the first moonshot, okay? And he was a self-taught person. He was a ship chandler, okay? So looking at, different, I'm pretty much a picker, and I pick from. But what I like to do then is to see where this compares with this, compares with this. Yeah. Does that kind of answer your question? Yeah. But I love, for instance, I love science fiction because it is so possible to me. There were, we were talking, and there's a couple of favorite episodes, like the one where Commander Data has a creates a child, and the child then becomes sentient. And for the same reason, I love Short Circuit, because Johnny Five, but it's how fast a child inputs information and how much information they need, but how much they take it literally because they don't have the world of experience to interpret. So they're taking it very literally. And so when you are 40 years old, if you got stuck as a 2-year-old, how many of you have ever seen a rageaholic? Anybody ever seen one go zero over to just lose it at a Okay, that person is a functional 2-year-old emotionally. Okay, because when you look at their tantrums, it's just like a 2-year-old pitching a tantrum because they didn't get their way, and they learned early on the best defense is a good offense, so they immediately go on the offense, and the whole bullying thing. Okay, that's where those, so many of us function in different aspects of our lives still in those first 7 years. Okay? A lot of our patterns that we still use to get our needs met are the adaptations. Okay? So those are just part of the flavor that make up how we get to be where we are.